2 bullets. That's what it took to make a 7-year-old girl scream my name. A girl who hadn't spoken one single word in 18 months. I felt the first one hit my shoulder blade like a fist made of fire. The second one, lower, I didn't even feel until later. What I remember most is the sound before the pain. 2 cracks, close together, like the sky splitting open. And underneath me, pinned to the cold museum steps, Ivy Doyle screamed my name into my ear like she'd been saving it up her whole life. I was 27 years old, broke, exhausted, and about to bleed out on top of a mob boss's daughter. 9 weeks earlier, none of this made any sense. 9 weeks earlier, I just needed a job. Back then, my life was small and stretched thin in every direction. I worked as a speech therapist at a community clinic on Chicago's South Side, mostly with kids who'd stopped talking after something broke them. A car accident, a bad divorce, worse things I won't get into. I'd been raising my 6-year-old nephew Milo since my sister Beth died 8 months earlier. An aneurysm. No warning. One Tuesday she was texting me about ordering pizza, and by Wednesday I was signing guardianship papers. Milo had a heart defect he was born with, and it was catching up to him. The specialist who could actually fix it was out of network. Insurance denied the claim twice. The public waitlist was 11 months long, and his cardiologist wouldn't say it out loud, but her face said it. Milo didn't have 11 months to spare. So when a black SUV was idling outside my apartment building one night, and a man in an expensive suit rolled the window down and said my name, I didn't run. I got in. His name was Mr. Halloway. He talked like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. 4 specialists have already failed with this child, Ms. Kessler, he said. Mr. Doyle does not have patience for a 5th. Doctors call it selective mutism. That always sounded too clinical to me. Something had scared the words right out of a little girl, and nobody could tell me what. The offer was $20,000 a month. A $200,000 bonus if I got her talking again within 90 days. Enough, almost to the dollar, to cover Milo's entire surgery. What's the catch? I asked. Discretion, Halloway said. What you see in that house, you didn't. I looked at a photo of Milo on my phone, him grinning with a gap where his front tooth used to be, and I signed. The family's name was Doyle. That's all I knew. Kilbride House sat behind a stone wall on the North Shore, the kind of place with its own gate code and a guard who checked my ID against a list even though I was expected. Cameras everywhere. Biometric locks on doors that had no business being locked. The house manager, Mrs. Kowalski, met me in the foyer with a folder of rules. Stay out of the East Wing. Ivy eats at 6, sharp. Mr. Doyle doesn't like surprises. Whatever you hear in this house, whatever you see, she said, not even looking up from the folder. You didn't. Then, almost like an afterthought, she added something that didn't mean much to me yet. Doyle men don't do anything halfway, Ms. Kessler. Not business, not family. You'll learn that. Ivy was small for 7, with her father's dark hair and eyes that watched everything like she was cataloging it for later. She carried a whiteboard instead of a voice. Her first message to me, written without even looking up, was blunt. You won't stay. I didn't argue with her. I'd learned a long time ago that pushing a silent kid just teaches them silence works. So I sat down across from her with a sketch pad and drew a lopsided cat, and I didn't ask her a single question. We sat like that for almost an hour. Then, right before I left for the day, she slid a drawing across the table toward me. Just a house, a dog, nothing dark in it at all. It wasn't much, but it was the first crack. I heard her crying over the baby monitor a little after 2 in the morning. I threw on a robe and went to check on her, and that's when I saw it. 3 men half carrying a 4th through a side entrance, his shirt soaked dark red down one side. Guns came up the second they saw me in the hallway. Then a voice cut through it, flat and absolutely certain of itself. Down. Callum Doyle. I hadn't met him yet, not properly, but I knew instantly this was him. Blood on his sleeve, calm in a way that had nothing to do with the situation being calm. You're the new one, he said. The specialist. I was checking on Ivy. Then you'll forget what checking on Ivy looked like tonight. We understand each other. I said yes. What else do you say to a man who just watched 3 armed men lower their guns because he told them to? I lay in bed after, staring at the ceiling, putting it together piece by piece. The cameras. The wing I wasn't allowed in. Doyle Freight and Logistics, the company on all the paperwork I'd signed, that any Chicagoan would have told you was just a trucking company if you asked them at a bar. It wasn't just a trucking company. I was living inside the house of the most powerful crime family in Chicago. I thought about walking out that night. I thought about Milo's cardiologist instead, and I stayed. Weeks went by, and something between me and Ivy started to actually take root. Drawing sessions turned into picture card games, and picture card games turned into her humming. No words yet, just sound, but sound was everything. The first time she hummed along to a song on the radio, I had to turn away so she wouldn't see me tear up. Callum started noticing. I'd catch him lingering in the hallway outside her playroom, leaving for his evening meetings a little later than he used to. But it wasn't all soft. One night, I was getting a glass of water in the kitchen when Marcus Kane stepped in front of the doorway, blocking it without quite touching me. Callum's right hand. Ivy called him Uncle Marcus, 20 years with the family. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You're a line item, sweetheart, he said. A liability with a paycheck. The second you cost more than you're worth, you're gone. I filed that away and told myself it was just a warning. I didn't know yet it was a preview. The drawing came a few days later, during a normal session. Ivy usually drew houses, dogs, her mother's garden. This one was different. Headlights, a second car, a shadow of a person standing where no person should be standing. I used our yes or no signals, gentle as I could make them. Is this about that night? She nodded. Then she grabbed the paper back and shoved it under a pillow, shaking. I brought it to Callum, thinking it might help him understand what she'd seen. Instead, something in his face closed like a door. You were hired to help her talk, he said. Not dig up things that don't concern you. He walked out mid-sentence. It was the first real friction between us, and it was also the first time I saw him as something other than terrifying. He wasn't angry at me. He was scared of exactly the same thing she was. That same afternoon, Milo's cardiologist's office called about scheduling. A small, quiet reminder that his clock was still running underneath everything else in that house. I didn't know this yet. I only found out weeks later, when Callum told me everything, but you should know it now, because I didn't. Marcus Kane met a contact from the Sokolov Bratva, a rival organization that had been circling Doyle territory for months, in the back of a bar that didn't ask questions. He'd been feeding them information for a long time. He's been soft since his wife, Marcus told him. Soft men make mistakes. The Gala's the opening. He'll have his guard down, and the daughter and the therapist will both be right there next to him. Then, almost as an afterthought, chilling in how casual it sounded, this isn't even the first mistake I've cleaned up for this family. If I'd known, I never would have let Callum walk out that door with his daughter. But I didn't know. So we went to the gala. The Doyle Foundation Gala was held at the Field Museum, under that huge dinosaur skeleton in the main hall, and it was Ivy's first public event since her mother died. I'd pushed Callum to actually be there with her, not just show up for a photo and leave. She needs you standing next to her tonight, I told him. Not working the room. He looked at me a beat longer than the sentence required. All right, Nora. First time he'd used my name instead of Ms. Kessler, or nothing at all. Ivy wore a green dress and stayed glued to my side all night, overwhelmed by the noise and the flashbulbs. Then, in the middle of a slow song, she hummed along out loud, where people could actually hear her. A small triumph nobody in that room but me understood the size of. We were leaving through the side entrance when a car rolled up slow along the curb and the windows came down. Gunfire. 2 shots, then more, people screaming and scattering. Callum shoved Ivy behind a stone pillar and returned fire, pulling the shooter's attention onto himself, away from her. But there was a second man. One of the temp security hires cleared personally by Marcus for the event that night. He came through the panicking crowd fast, weapon rising, aimed at Ivy, and Callum was too far away to reach her. I wasn't. I didn't think about the contract, or the money, or even Milo in that half second. I thought about the sound of Ivy humming 20 minutes earlier, and I moved. I threw myself over her small body just as the shots fired. 2 bullets. One in my shoulder blade. One lower, I wouldn't understand how bad until later. And underneath me, Ivy Doyle, silent for 18 months, screamed my name. Nora. Her voice. She has a voice, I thought, as the world went white at the edges. That was the last clear thought I had before everything went dark. I woke up in a private clinic, the kind that doesn't file police reports and doesn't ask names twice. My shoulder blade was fractured. The second bullet had lodged near my spine. The surgeon told me later that an inch either way and I wouldn't have walked again. Callum was in the chair beside my bed, still in his ruined suit, looking like a man who hadn't slept and didn't plan to until I woke up. "She's safe," he said, before I could even ask. "And Nora, she's been talking. Not much, but talking. She asked for you by name." He sat with that for a second, and then he did something I didn't expect. He offered me a way out. "When you're well enough, I can get you and Milo somewhere safe. Somewhere far from all of this." I could have let him finish that sentence. I didn't. "I'm not going anywhere," I told him, weak but clear. I meant it more than I'd ever meant anything in my life. Callum told me all of this later, once it was over. He tore through his own organization looking for the leak, and it didn't take him long. Pressure on a captured Sokolov associate produced the instructions given for the hit, nearly word for word. "She's a liability," the man had said. "Handle it before she costs us more than she's worth." When Callum repeated that sentence to me at my bedside, I went cold. It was almost exactly what Marcus had said to me, alone, in the kitchen, weeks before any of this happened. "That's what he said to me," I told Callum. Word for word, almost. Callum went very quiet. 20 years, he said. He held her the day she was born. That was enough. His own head of security, a man Ivy called Uncle Marcus, had sold them out. And Callum was starting to suspect it went back further than one Gala. I was recovering at Kilbride house by then. Callum wouldn't let me go anywhere else. I was nearby, in the next room, when he had Marcus brought in. It wasn't supposed to include Ivy at all. But she felt the tension crawling through the house the way kids always do, and she wandered into the doorway before anyone could stop her, and saw him. Something in her broke open right there. "The man," she said, halting, simple, devastating in how plain it was. "He was at the car. After Mommy. He told me not to tell or he'd come back." Marcus stopped denying anything the second she said it. His mask just came off. "Elena was going to run to the feds," he said, flat, almost proud. "I protected this family before you were soft enough to need protecting from yourself. I did what I always do." Callum was shaking with a rage he wouldn't let his daughter see. He didn't become the man who breaks his own child's sense of safety. He just had Marcus removed from the house. I pulled Ivy into my arms and held her while she shook. "You did the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do," I told her. "You told the truth." In Callum's world, nobody had to explain the rule to me twice. Doyle men didn't walk away. The Empire ran until it, or someone else, buried them. So when Callum sat me down a few weeks later and told me what he decided, I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. He wasn't taking quiet revenge and going back to business as usual. He was dismantling the criminal side of the organization, on his own terms, piece by piece, and keeping only what had always been real, the freight company, the foundation. "I spent my whole life thinking this empire was the only thing keeping my family safe," he said. "It took almost losing both of you to understand it was the opposite. I'm done. I've been told a dozen times, by a dozen different people, that a man like Callum Doyle doesn't walk away. I watched him do it anyway." 6 months later, it was just an ordinary Sunday at Kilbride House. Ivy talks nonstop now, like she's making up for 18 months of silence all at once. Milo was over for the weekend, his surgery long done, fully paid for, and he was just a regular 6-year-old chasing Ivy through the backyard, both of them shrieking about something that mattered enormously to them and to absolutely no one else. Callum was on the porch, on the phone about a freight contract. Not a hit. A contract. And me, I was in the kitchen, half listening for my husband to wander in and steal a cookie off the tray before dinner, because yes, somewhere in these last 6 months, that happened too. People ask me if I was scared, walking into that house 9 weeks before any of this started. I was terrified. But I've learned that the people who need protecting the most rarely come with a warning label. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't running. It's staying. I still think about what would have happened if I'd said no in that SUV outside my apartment. Would you have taken the risk? Let me know in the comments. If this story stuck with you the way it still sticks with me, hit that like button. It genuinely helps these stories find more people. And if you want more like it, go ahead and subscribe, because I've got plenty more where this came from. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.